among the countries of the Global South, which countries do you see as the most supportive of the CFS? And are there any countries that were supportive of the CFS, but whose attitude towards land investment and land acquisition is somehow in conflict with the project of the civil society?
I think I'd like to reply to that question with the word complexity, and to echo what Mate said at the beginning, that it makes no sense to try to categorize the world in terms of these are the goodies and these are the baddies. I mean, there are values like defending the rights of the vulnerable and managing the planet in a sustainable way rather than an unsustainable way that we can agree are better and worse. But it's very difficult, as you know very well. Brazil is, there's someone from Brazil, no, someone, yeah, is schizophrenic, no? I mean, it has two ministries, one of which is pushing growing and exporting genetically modified sorghum and big plantations, and the other is pushing family farming, promoting family farming. They have the best public procurement program going. So you have these contradictions within a single country. You can imagine what it looks like when you come to the global level. And I think this is one of the reasons why a course like this is so important. It's not simple. And the same countries, as I mentioned before, there was some the European Union is founded on the human rights framework. It's part of the Lisbon Treaty. It's part of the founding principles of it. But the European Union is 27 countries with very different political and economic interests. So you can manage to get a consensus on some basic issues, and it can break down when you come to something like negotiating principles of responsible investment. So I think that's that's the answer, and that's why it's important for the organizations and the forces who represent the people who are really directly affected by all of these policies that are being decided to start back home. This is my sense, is that accountability has to build up from the base. It can't be invented at the global level and transited downwards. And it's very important that civil society and committed, engaged lawyers like you all be able to help them interpret what's going on, what the power plays are, and where to make the tactic and the strategic alliances at different moments, because it can change from issue to issue, it can change from moment to moment. It's not written in stone. The only thing that's written in stone is the axis between one of my governments, which I have double citizenship level, the United States, Canada, and Australia, who are always baddies. They never seem to change, but everything else is fairly malleable.
May I make a comment? I just, I listened I was very fascinated by your presentation. I wanted to kind of frame it as a comment because I wanted to preface it with how impressed I was. I've been grappling with this material for myself, and to see all of this material condensed in a relatively short lecture in such a lucid way, I thought I just wanted to acknowledge, to sort of show my gratitude for that. Then I wanted to add a comment because I think what the sort of panorama that you highlighted for us has to do with one possible way of framing legal activism and intervention in relation to smallholder farming issues, namely through the channel of international representation and international regulation. And I wanted to kind of add to that another prong, because there are many different and parallel ways that legal activism can express itself in these types of issues. And then the one that I wanted to bring is the idea of legal self-help, which ties in with the common struggles. Namely, there's not just the way of having legislation change from above, but there are existing legal categories like, for example, the trust or the foundation that can be used and have been used in the Italian commons movement. Ugo is an expert and a pioneer in that. which sort of lawyers are tinkering with in a very kind of medievally creative way, to try and protect the resources around which communities sort of derive their livelihoods. So this was, as I said, I framed it as a comment because it's not so much to remark an absence, because there was a lot of ground to cover, and you've done it in a remarkable way. I just wanted to kind of broaden the picture to show that there are different forms of legal activism, and that this form of activism can take.
Well, I thank you for that comment, and in fact, in the exchanges that I've been having, we had a very nice dinner yesterday evening and started talking a bit about the IUC and the new course in food that's going to be developed, and I had the occasion to remark, and I'll remark to you as well, that one of the missing components in the kind of expertise that social movements that are working on food issues have, by now, there's really good relations have been built up with political scientists, political economists, of course the whole, agrarian field, et cetera, but perhaps the most important missing ingredient are lawyers, people with a law background, who are working on just that kind of direction that you mentioned, and that's what I see as really a very important value added of the IUC and this new course that will be developed.
I have also a little point on this narrative of activism being successful when it produces changes that is conceded from those that actually do control the legal system, right? In other words, you mobilize, and it's very important to have mobilization, but the success of a mobilization is when it is capable to determine the production of law by some of those who have the power to produce the law, which in our modern organization of society, since modernity happened to be the governments, okay, and the parliaments and the hierarchical structure of states. So that's one of the points of your narrative, which is, let's use a lot of activism, extremely important, because without activism, law doesn't change, it's for the good. The other point is what you said just at the end. You said, "Oh, my government, Canada, the United States, and whatever, and England are always on the wrong side." And now I'm wondering and thinking kind of structurally, and also in terms of patterns of political and institutional development. I wonder whether they are always on the wrong side because they are better governments. In other words, is there such a thing as a government who can be a friend of this kind of movement? Is this model of production of law, is the concentration of power that government entails something that can be deployed as a way to change for the good? This is the real question, because the reason why the United States and England and these guys are always on the bad side is they function much better as governments.
Yeah.
Governments that are on the so governments that don't function as governments, that aim to become good governments in the future, developing the rule of law, developing non-corrupt organization, all these kind of things, are eventually gonna be better concentrators of power on the legal system. And therefore, are going to be the kind of the selected, the selected interlocutors of the strong corporate organization that works as a corporation itself. So, I have the foundational question to me is whether the public or the private, the corporation, of course, the corporation its target is to externalize as much as possible, to make as much money as possible in as short time as possible, roaming the world, and we say, well, that's their nature. But is the nature of government that different? That's the question.
Well, I suppose that there are a number of foundational questions here, of which maybe the most basic is, what are we going to do with the state system? Is this, it's only been with us for a couple of centuries. Is it going to be the way that society is organized forever, or what else might come up? And what does the transition look like? That's one question. Another question is, what are governments supposed to do? I mean, are governments, if you say better governments, you mean maybe stronger governments, and certainly the alliance between corporate funding and corporate power and certain functions of government produces strong governments that are always on the wrong side. No, but maybe that's not what governments are supposed to do. I mean, in theory, the government process, which is not just the executive power, of course, but also parliaments and increasingly seen as a multi-level operation. No, that too is complex. They're in the even in the United States, there are states of the United States that are like Vermont has established a law that obliges labeling that shows GMOs in the labeling, although this contradicts the national law, which is in accord with the WTO principles. So there too it's
also Campbell Soup has done that. Yeah. Campbell, the corporation that does the soup now has writes down that it acknowledged the presence of GMOs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
In order to make their better face.
Be transparent. Yeah. So there are big questions about that too. But I think these are the fascinating. We're in an age, as I said at the beginning, we're in an age where equilibriums are in any event being questioned. I think we're in a situation where it's becoming clear, even to the public in the U.S., which tends to be the most isolated from this kind of critical thinking, that climate change is a reality. The climate change deniers up until very recently were winning the day. Now it's recognized that climate change is a reality. It's recognized by some, and certainly this will become more common knowledge, that agriculture is an important contributor to, or in any event, an important factor in climate change. There's more and more concern about childhood obesity in the U.S. There are many ways in which, this is one of the reasons why I think food is a good choice for the new course you're coming up with, because it's really at the heart both of the economic and geopolitical games that are being played today, but also it's something that's so important for people around the world, and it's becoming increasingly important in Europe, in the United States, that the way the food system is organized today is just not working for people, wherever they are. So there is more attention that's putting governments and corporations under pressure. I don't think anyone has a total understanding of where this is going to lead us, but it's certainly a moment of change, and moments of change are always interesting ones to be engaged in.
Thank you. I would like you to have a comment on the fact that there is the World Economic Forum and there is also the World Economic Development Forum.
The World Economic
Development Forum, which is different from the World Economic Forum. And I think the World Economic Forum is composed of countries which are developing. And people give much importance on the World Economic Forum and they give less on the second one. So, and I think that should be focused most on the second, the World Economic Forum, because it's the one like most of countries which attended are countries that meet the food security problem. And their governments are just interested in attracting corporations, doing business, and they always remember, not forget or don't give importance on saying about the food insecurity. And for example, I attended a conference in 2014 of the World Economic Development Forum, and it was like they forgot about the food security and what was not good. Like most of African countries and other developing countries, they were only interested in saying that the countries we should come and invest in the country, in corporations, and they forgot to talk about the big issue, which is food security. So
I totally agree with you. It's outrageous. The World Economic Forum is not country-based. It's corporation-based. Countries come and allow themselves, governments come and allow themselves to be seduced by the corporations, but it's actually the organization is an organization of corporations, so it's the big economic interests. But it's just outrageous if you read any of the declarations or the materials that come out about, the World Bank itself published a couple of years ago a report in which it stated quite unashamedly that Africa is the last frontier for investment in for agribusiness. And so you really do have, and in Africa, which is the region that I've done most of my work in and that I feel most strongly attached to, you really do have an almost total opposition between the narrative that says the only way for Africa to progress is by developing value chains with the help of the corporations that have the management skills and blah, 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 and hooking into the global economy, and that's the way forward. And the reality, which is totally different, and the governments know that. I mean, you know that the people in governments know very well. If you walk, as I've done, down the streets of Nairobi, and you run into a guy with a suit and a tie walking out of a government ministry, and you ask him where he sources his maize, which is a staple crop in Kenya, he says, it comes from the farm up country, the family farm, and people know that that's where food comes from. They know very well, and they all know very well that it's the weekly markets and the village markets, that this is where the transactions take place. And yet, I think in part for self-interest, and in part also because of cultural formation. I mean, many of the leaders of countries in Africa today have been instructed in the U.S., in Europe, that they've had that kind of training, which is pretty much the opposite of what you're going to be getting here. They've not been trained, so they may think that they're really. I mean, we could, you and I and others could go on about this, the whole colonial experience and the whole process of disempowerment of rural areas and agriculture, but in fact that is why I say that's why it seems to me that the only hope is for governments of Africa, but not only to have to pay more attention to the needs and concerns of their citizens and less attention to the blandishments of outside powers I can't see it happening any other way. They're not going to just wake up from one moment to the next and become enlightened and working on behalf of the citizens' goods. But I don't know, what do you think? What is the hope?
I don't know, my point of view, according to the populations, why the population is suffering is not everything. So I think the government should emphasize on securing food, securing the population, because when the population is secured, we have food, so they work and the country can change. That's my point of view.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that. That's what government should do.
Yeah, but they are structurally built not to do that.
Exactly.
That's the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not more, yeah.
Exactly.
Like if you go back to 2 slides before the last one, I saw a statement which I think is very threatening. Yes. I think Richard is very right in depicting what we are living today. But in this time when we are all scared, depicting the truth should be structured in such a way that we propagate for regenerative ways of claiming for our commons, claiming for our ecology. But saying that it is politically impossible, meaning we should go back to kind of saying he's about to say that it's politically impossible to claim for our ecology when we live in this situation. But then that is like giving back to the multinationals that the solution lies in your hands and that they will never do. So I think the only possible means is politically. even though it's going to be very difficult, but we cannot say our solution is still in the hands of the multinationals who will never listen to it. This statement should be...
No, but because he uses political in a very narrow way. I mean, Falk is a typical lawyer. So for him, political is like when you go and you are going out in activism, and they tell you, oh, why don't you do politics? What am I doing? You know, I'm doing politics. I'm just not running for office. So what he says here is politically possible means it's politically possible within the frame of the political process made of political professionals. You know, and so it's not politically possible to actually persuade governments or parliaments to do something in a given direction. But so the political possibility to me is a much completely different kind of concept, and I agree totally with you, Elijah, that you know the as it's phrased there is.
But I've taken this out of context. Thank you for drawing my attention to it, because in fact what he is saying, as you know, he's using the term here, politically possible, in the narrow sense of what is possible with the political system that we're living with today. But he doesn't stop there. He says, so we can't be realists. We have to be utopians. We have to develop the politics of desire, the politics of what should be and not what is. So this statement is just a launching pad to move on.
Yes, you spoke of world market and of its effects on the agriculture, but and you spoke also of local level and how on local level we have good examples of different type of organization and satisfaction of needs for food and so on. But could you give us some examples of something that transcends the local level, of institutional framework that is built towards satisfaction of needs for food on more than a local level, which is not world market, which is not market oriented in this sense and profit making oriented?
Well, I can talk to you, but I'm sure there are other people in the room who can do so for other areas of the world. But for example, in West Africa, is there anyone here from West Africa? I think not. No, you have.
I am from West Africa.
Where are you from? From Ghana?
I am from the Gambia.
From the Gambia.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then you can support or refute what I'm about to say. But certainly one of the aspirations in West Africa is towards building up a regional reality, including a regional market, and there are very good reasons for doing so.
My thesis was about that.
Okay. And there are very strong complementarities between the different kinds of productions. You know, West Africa is a very diverse region between the Sahelian, more pastoralist productions and the coastal, more tropical, et cetera, et cetera. The rice produced in Mali could, you know, feed the whole region. So there's an important movement, which in fact the peasant movement has been very engaged in. The ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, passed in, I think, 2005, a regional agricultural policy, which actually talks about supporting family farming as the basis of West African agriculture and building the possibility of better exchanges, which take place in an informal way anyways, as you know very well. You know, there are weekly markets in which 4 different countries participate, but this is, you know, the informal marketing. But this is runs into difficulties when, for example, the European Union pushes onto West Africa the economic partnership agreements, which have a fight that's been going on for a decade with resistance on the part, certainly of the small-scale farmers' organizations, but not only, and mobilization also in Europe, and this dog-headed determination on the part of the European Union. I won't go into details now. You can talk to your colleagues behind you to get the details of how this aspiration to build a regional reality that would be supportive of local efforts and would provide a kind of a natural continuum from the local to the district, to the national, so these things are underway, and I'm sure in Latin America this is
the Alianza Bolivariana,
yeah,
between
Right, right. So it's not just an ideal, it's, and of course we have Europe. We should have Europe, which in some ways.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I would have a 10-minute break, 10 minutes, no more. Then we will have Tommaso's presentation, and then we will have a buffet on the third floor.